What's cracking? Welcome to Griffin and Bass. He's Griffin, I'm Bass. Before we dive into everything regarding Hard Knocks, Lions Steelers final preseason game, college football this weekend, as well as some NBA roundup for you to finish off the show. Got to remind you guys to like and subscribe everywhere you can find us. That would be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We got full episodes on YouTube as well as DetroitSportsNation.com. All right, Ryan. So we have now 3 episodes down out of the 5 for Hard Knocks. This latest one went around with the joint practice with the Colts, the reaction to the loss to the Falcons, a stand-up comedian breaking up the monotony, I guess, of training camp, and a nice finish by the Lions defense to hold off the Colts with a 1-point victory. I'll get into, what stood out for me, aside from Deuce Staley losing his voice. What stood out for you in this latest episode of Hard Knocks?
Because it seems like they're focusing on a bunch of guys that they probably shouldn't be focusing on anymore. They don't have so many episodes left. 2 or 3 or something they have left of Hard Knocks. And you had a whole bunch of focus on Obina Eze, who's probably not going to make the team because every time they showed him, he was getting beat on the offensive line or he was doing something wrong. And then they also showed the old Pimpleton from Central Michigan, and he did the juggling thing when he was up in front of the team. And then they showed him in the game action, and he's dropping touchdowns and dropping passes and stuff. So I can't imagine that either of these guys are making the team, which to me, I don't know. I want some focus on our star players. I want to see some of Jared Goff. I want to see some of DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, because we really haven't seen so many of those guys. We've seen more of St. Brown's dad than we have seen of the actual wide receiver on our team, and the only thing we've seen with DeAndre Swift is him out here getting yelled at. So it was disappointing to me, from that standpoint. I don't know, man. I just want to see our good players finally and see how they react and give me some Jameson Williams updates or something.
Yeah, no, I get that. The Pimpleton stuff. I mean, it got me rooting for him, when they were showing him in camp and, that he was, he looks like he's fast as hell. And, he was trying to use that speed to his advantage. It's a shame he dropped those passes, especially that touchdown. And then Eze was part of that 18-play drive to score the game-winning touchdown. So, it looks like he did his job on that drive at least. But I get what you mean. I kind of understand what Hard Knocks is doing as far as showing the guys trying to make the team. There's it's a more enjoyable story of guys we don't know, fighting and trying to make their way into a very, very select fraternity of guys who have played in the NFL. Surprisingly, I'm on the opposite side of that, with a guy who's been performing while not being a named guy is Tom Kennedy. I didn't see any Kennedy whatsoever, except for obviously in the game, they highlighted his touchdowns. But in training camp and everything else, I didn't see him at all, which I was surprised about with how well he's performed through the first 2 preseason games, 100-plus yards in the first game, 2 touchdowns in the second game. So that was surprising to me. I get where you're coming from. I think the reason for it is because we're not going to see these guys much. And so, the guys that you are going to see, Jared Goff, Jared Goff's not even, he's not really even a part of the show outside of a little bit of what they showed in the joint practice because his spot's secure. There's no question who the starting quarterback is for the Detroit Lions this year. It's Jared Goff. Blau and Boyle are obviously playing for the backup spot. They're not fighting Goff for his position. And so we don't see much of him. We saw Swift in his conversations with Deuce Staley, but it's obvious who our number 1 running back is. It's Swift. And so there's not as much about him. There should be. I agree with you on that, especially a young player like Swift who is still trying to learn how to be a lead back in the NFL. Injury issues have played a part in it, but his performance as well has not been where Staley wants it to be. Obviously, you've seen how mad Staley gets at what he could be versus what he is, and he needs to believe that he can be this guy. So I get where you're coming from, but I think I see why HBO is doing it the way they are. But I, too, agree with you. I would like to see more from our guys that we're going to be seeing throughout the next, 4 months.
I still want to see some of the guys that have name recognition and guys that, a national audience is going to know of. They're going to know of DeAndre Swift because he's probably going to go, in the second round of their fantasy drafts. And Jared Goff was the number 1 pick who made a Super Bowl, not with the Lions, with a different team, but he's still a well-known guy. We haven't really seen any of TJ Hawkinson either. And The other thing I guess we can take away from this episode of Hard Knocks anyway is something I think every Lions fan should have known, but that Alex Anzalone is going to be definitely one of the starting linebackers. He was the linebacker who didn't play in the game because the linebacker coach, is it Kelvin Shepard, I think his name is, said no because Alex is making the team, and everyone else is like, yep, okay. And if you follow the Lions, that's something that you probably should have already known, but it seems like we got that confirmed.
One thing they keep hammering home is just how motivational Dan Campbell is. I mean, his speeches are just absolutely on point. Even when they go off on random tangents about getting the dust out of your pants or whatever, that last little bit that he's got to clean up and everything. But the way he goes about it, he says man way too often. Every sentence ends with the word man. But his speeches are absolutely on point. You know, they get you going, they crack me up. But you can see how much this man believes in what they are trying to build in Detroit. And it's just, every time I watch more of him, it reaffirms what I felt when they first chose him to be our head coach. I really want to root for this guy. I really want this guy to win. And I really hope this guy sticks around for a long time. Because if he is sticking around for a long time, then it's hopefully not a Wayne Font situation where we're just okay, but a situation where we are now a competent NFL team and a team that is fighting year in and year out for the playoffs, for an NFC championship. He seems like he has it in a way that I haven't seen the Lions produce as far as a head coach in a really long time.
And him being a good head coach is still, up in the air, obviously, and it's probably not going to be determined for a couple years in the future. But he's super entertaining, and it seems like the guys like him at least. So now that he has the part down where the players can relate to him, it's all about, can he produce on the field? Can he manage a game? Can he manage the clock? Can he put the right people in charge of all the right things? And that is, kind of what's going to determine, of course, like it does for almost every coach, what's going to determine his success in the NFL and his success here in Detroit, because the players obviously like him and they resonate with them. They were even talking about on TJ Hawkinson was on Bassin with the Boys podcast with Taylor Lewan and Will Compton, and they essentially asked him, so you, since you've been in the league, all you've done is lose, but what's the difference between losing with Matt Patricia and losing with Dan Campbell? And he said with Dan Campbell, it was just different because the guys did trust him and that Campbell was the same throughout the week. Or he said with Patricia, Patricia was cool outside of football, but then when he got in the locker room, the meeting room, whatever you want to say, he said, he tried to be Bill Belichick. He, completely switched up his personality. And with Campbell, that's just not the case, at least according to Hawkinson. And looking at the cameras, it doesn't seem like it'd be the case. And, seeing how Campbell conducts himself in press interviews and stuff. So it's a big difference between them, but it certainly seems like the players prefer this method.
Could you imagine this show with Matt Patricia still as the head coach of the Detroit Lions? I don't even know what I would expect to see outside of players just being despondent, having to listen to this fake head coach try and be a head coach and not know what the hell he's doing. I get it, Dan Campbell's still new and still young and he's still learning how to be a head coach, but there's just something about him, his vibe. Maybe it's because he was a former player and stuck around for so long and went right from playing into being under Bill Parcells and being under Sean Payton, where, you're talking about, one of the greatest coaches of all time in Parcells, and Payton, who did a pretty damn good job in New Orleans for the time that he was there. And then there's Matt Patricia, who was obviously the Belichick disciple that is just not Belichick. And I don't think it would be nearly, and I'm not talking about what Campbell has done that makes it entertaining, but the players themselves and how they respond to it. I think it would just be an absolute disaster watching this if Matt Patricia was still
you'd probably see Matt Patricia, yell at a lot of people. There's obviously that story that Darius Slay told on, excuse me. There's that story that Darius Slay told on First Take a year or two ago, maybe, where he was going up against some top receiver, and Patricia basically told them stop, train them with. Is probably the easiest way that we can say it here. And I feel like you just see a bunch of stuff like that. You probably actually see more ripping of the players. Like if you've already thought you've seen a lot with Deuce Staley, I think you would even got more of that with Matt Patricia.
All right, speaking of Deuce. So in the joint practice, Jamal Williams was getting it with Zaire Franklin, linebacker for the Colts. I mean, he was getting them and just not stopping and just causing a ruckus. But at the end, he's not catching the passes that are thrown his way. He wasn't performing as well as he should have been, and he might have been a little too focused on getting into it with Franklin than doing his job. And Deuce let him know that it wasn't good enough, but his voice was already gone from all the yelling from the practice. So now he's trying to yell in like this like whisperish, quiet like scream. And it's just like props to the players for not laughing while they're being yelled at by Deuce with no voice whatsoever. But it was definitely entertaining to try and see Deuce try and get his point across with no voice whatsoever.
That was the highlight of the episode to me, was Deuce Staley not having a voice and still trying to yell, because like he really didn't have a voice. Not just he kind of lost it and he was a little raspy. He was like quiet as a mouse. And not only Jamal Williams, it didn't seem like anybody performed well that day for the Lions. So Deuce really wanted to drive it into him, but like he just can't. You're probably not taking him seriously when he's just so quiet. But he was MFing all the guys up there, and it should have been a really impassioned speech. But I think the version we got of it was way funnier.
All right, and then a little bit later on, they had Josh Adams, local Detroit comedian, come down and basically just roast Hutch, roast Anzalone, and of course roast Dan Campbell, where you're comparing Campbell to Hulk Hogan, talking about how big he is and we need him on special teams. Hutch is basically, a Backstreet Boy, but on steroids. And Anzalone looks like Thor. I thought he nailed it. I thought his bit was great for what they showed. And it looked like the players, they didn't show Campbell, but apparently Campbell appreciated it.
It was funny.
Well.
I probably could have done without it. Like, I don't know. I just would have rather seen some of the stuff that we talked about a little bit earlier, in a focus on Hawk or Swift or Goff, Amon-Ra, and like any of the players on the Lions who might actually be good, because they don't have a lot of them. Or anybody on the offensive line, right? Sewell, Ragnow, Taylor Decker. Give me literally anybody. And that is just obviously not what ended up happening. But it was funny, and, good for Josh Adams to get kind of a spotlight like this, where there's a lot of people who didn't know who he was, who, now maybe they Googled him after this episode. And good for him. He got his own HBO special in some way.
Right? Well, hopefully we'll get to see more of that with this upcoming episode. This will be episode 4 of 5 for Hard Knocks. The Detroit Lions getting ready for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the final preseason game of the year in Pittsburgh. So hopefully we're going to see, because obviously rosters are getting cut, all the time. More and more guys are getting dropped from the roster as the Lions work their way down to a 53-man roster to start off the regular season. As far as the Lions and Steelers going off this weekend, both teams apparently, according to Dan Campbell in a conversation with Mike Tomlin, that starters will be playing about a half for both of these teams. But Jared Goff is not part of the plan. I'm not surprised by this, Ryan. I'm sure you're not either. Jared Goff's, like I already said, his role is set. We know what he is. He's a starting quarterback this year. He's gotten plenty of reps in practice and, working on, he got into the season early with the wide receivers to work on, that cohesiveness. It's Blau and Boyle. Who is going to be the backup? And it looks like for this game, at least to start, it sounds like Dan Campbell is leaning towards Tim Boyle to be the starter against the Steelers in this final preseason game.
With Goff not playing, I understand that 100%. You, of course, don't want him to get hurt. But since Goff isn't playing, I don't think there's anything that we can take away from this game, because they're going to be out there without their starting quarterback. I guess you can see how the defense fares, but if Mitch Trubisky plays, he's somebody who's tore the Lions defense up pretty much every single time that he's played them. He hasn't torn anybody else up, but as soon as he sees the Lions on the field opposite of him, he turns into Dan Reno. So we're going to see that. I expect the offensive line to block pretty well, and they are going up against a Steelers defensive line that includes T.J. Watt. I don't exactly know if T.J. Watt's going to play. Like I said, I know you just said that they want to play the starters the entire first half, but teams say that, and then they end up sitting like the important guys like Goff anyway. So it'd be cool to see T.J. Watt go up against, like Penei Sewell, and that's something that I'd be looking forward to. But in terms of the outcomes of this game or even how the offense looks, without Jared Goff, it seems like it's pretty moot to me.
Some interesting things to look for in this game. Apparently, the Steelers are having some issues with their offensive line. Mike Tomlin not happy with the performance so far in the preseason by his O-line. So it should be interesting to see the Lions starting defensive line against the Steelers O-line to see just if there's a mismatch there that the Lions can take advantage of. Get to see a little bit of Hutch, and then, try and ball out against a Steelers team that's, for the most part been one of the better teams in the NFL over the last 20 years. Another thing is that apparently Kenny Pickett can win the starting job for the first game of the season with a good performance against the Lions this week. Apparently that is still up in the air, and it is not Mitch's job yet.
You're going to get a good performance, it's going to be against the Lions. So it's so I guess he's set up pretty well there.
Worked in the past.
And I don't know. I feel like I'd still be shocked if Kenny Pickett was the Week 1 starter for Pittsburgh. But anything could happen. I thought Trubisky's played pretty well, at least throughout the preseason. Not that Pickett hasn't, but Trubisky's usually been the one going against the other team's first team defense, or what they set out as the first team of their defense in the preseason, I guess. So that would be kind of surprising to me. But yeah, man, if there's a time that you can win the job, it's going to be when the Lions are on the other side.
Well, I mean, look, that's a secondary that Kenny Pickett can pick apart. And we've seen it through these last 2 weeks in the preseason. Our secondary is god-awful. There's no mince in the words there. It's just not been good. And, I mean, you gave up the game-winning touchdown against the Falcons. You gave up what should have been a game-tying touchdown against the Colts, but the Colts decided to go for 2, and you were able to get pressure on Jack Cohn, formerly of Notre Dame and Wisconsin, to throw it to nobody in the end zone and escape with a 1-point victory, the first for Dan Campbell in the preseason as a Lions head coach and the first for the Lions since 2018. But that secondary has been awful. And Kenny Pickett can absolutely win the starting job by throwing for 3 touchdowns against this secondary. I agree with you. I don't think it's in Pickett's best interest to start right away. We've seen it just be a disaster for so many rookie quarterbacks, but those are usually rookie quarterbacks on bad teams. So maybe when you're on a team that's not bad, like Joey Harrington had to deal with in Detroit, maybe it's not the worst thing, but generally we like to see the rookies kind of ease into the role, and maybe 2/3 of the way through the season, they now are the starter as opposed to right there in week 1.
I mean, if the Lions are in a similar situation, next year, if they end up getting a rookie quarterback or something, I think it'll be kind of the same process, right? Pickett wasn't like a number 1 overall pick or anything. And sometimes those guys get to start right away because you've used such high draft capital on them. But typically when you pick a guy, 20th is where I think Pickett went, you get a little bit more leeway with not starting them right away. Because if they're ready to start right away, they probably would have been picked in the top 5. So I expect still Trubisky to be the starter and Pickett to eventually get the job. But again, I don't see that happening in week 1 at all. And it's probably, in Pickett's best interest, in the Steelers' best interest for that to happen.
The biggest thing I want to see a test with Najee Harris. We didn't have to deal with the starting running back for the Colts. Jonathan Taylor did not play in that game, and Najee Harris is, one of the better young backs in football. Had a hell of a rookie campaign last year. So I would like to see our starting defensive line, who has looked pretty good against the run. They shut down the Colts. Again, it was not Jonathan Taylor, but they did shut down the Colts rushing attack last week. Held them to like 30 yards. So I'd like to see in that first half our defensive line against the Steelers' offensive line, which apparently has been underperforming, but also with Najee Harris running behind them to see how they do against what is, in my mind, a more elite running back.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting. I don't expect it to go very well for the Lions because their linebacking room is probably the weakest unit on the team, and it's not like their front four is so great either, which is typically not a recipe for success against a great running back, which is what Najee Harris is. And I expect for the limited time that Najee Harris is on the field to be able to get some work in against the Lions and not have a whole lot of resistance doing so.
Yeah, I mean, they're apparently getting better. And I'd love to see them, see if they can hold Najee to under 4 yards a carry. But in the passing attack, it's a whole other animal, and I'm sure Najee's going to get plenty of yards, if he even plays in this game and how much he plays in this game. That would obviously skew his numbers a little bit. But just as a flat-out runner, I want to see that. I want to see them go up against this guy and see if they have a chance to shut him down and see if there's been improvement there on that defensive line. Seeing not so much Anzalone, but seeing, Rodriguez in a chance, a one-on-one with Harris and see if he can take him down. Fun things like that in the preseason. But no, I mean, I'm with you. Obviously, I don't have high expectations for this team. This defense especially, it needs a lot of work, especially in that secondary. But, I've liked what I've seen from the effort side of things when it comes to a lot of our new young guys. And, I'd like to see them in real situations against the guys that you're going to see throughout the rest of the season and not so much second and third stringers. So there are some things I'm looking forward to in this Steelers-Lions matchup, and hopefully the Lions perform.
I think that was a good call out by you. I didn't mean to poo-poo all over it. I just don't think they're going to have a lot of success.
Not
against Najee Harris, and it will be kind of what's expected.
Well, we will find out. It is the final preseason game of the NFL season before the real season kicks off shortly. Season kicking off even quicker than that. This weekend, Ryan,
yeah, buddy,
we got ourselves college football. Real counting towards the season. College football. It's going to kick off with Fox Big Noon 30. At 12:30 Eastern on Fox, the Nebraska Bug Eaters, Cornhuskers, whatever you want to call them, and the Northwestern Wildcats are going to be kicking it off in Ireland. And first of 11 games that will be played this weekend, 7 of which will feature 2 FBS teams. This was not a battle at all last year when Northwestern went to Lincoln and got absolutely cracked 56-7. Hopefully a little better showing than that for the fans in Dublin.
Northwestern's helmets are sweet, so even if they lose, they're going to look sweet doing it. And this is a game where Nebraska obviously wasn't very good last year, but they lost a whole lot of close games, like the most in the country by far. And Northwestern was, of course, one of the games that they won. And Nebraska's not returning a quarterback, but they got a quarterback from the transfer portal. And there was a stat that I was listening to Cash the Ticket earlier, and I believe Taylor Martinez, Adrian Martinez, whichever Martinez is there or was there, turned the ball over 64 or 68 times in like 30 games or something, which is over 2 turnovers a game, which is just absolutely insane, and it's why Nebraska loses a lot of one-score games. With this game, it doesn't seem like it'd be close. I think Nebraska's favored by 13.5. So they're getting 2 touchdowns on the point spread against Northwestern, which would tell you that Vegas doesn't think it's going to be close. But it is in Ireland. Northwestern's coach's name is Fitzgerald, so I guess we don't know what's going to happen. And Northwestern they're not always good, of course, but they have these years where they're pretty competitive in the Big Ten, and it just seems like it's kind of random. So I expect Nebraska to win. I'm not quite sure about that point spread, but I'm excited to watch this game because I want to see what kind of football in Dublin will look like.
Yeah, so last year Nebraska went 3-9, and all 9 of their losses were by single digits. And all 3 of their wins were by an average of 30 points or more. So a very weird season for Nebraska. And like you said with Northwestern, who also went 3-9 last season, they have this weird ability to show up, and it seems to be every other year. They won the Big Ten West in 2018 and 2020. Well, here we are in 2022. So maybe it's an every other year thing for Northwestern. You're right, they don't have to deal with Adrian Martinez. He is now at Kansas State. Casey Thompson is the incoming transfer from Texas. He had 24 touchdowns and 9 picks last season. He is the new starter for Nebraska. 13.5 point spread. Just going off of what I've seen from last year with Northwestern and just how really bad they actually were. I'm going to take the points in this one and say that Nebraska covers a 13.5 points. I can see a 20-point victory. I hope that's not the case for the fans in Aviva Stadium in Dublin. I hope they get to see a great game because obviously college football does not get out there that often for them to see. So I hope that Northwestern brings it. I hope Nebraska brings it. And I hope we kick off the college football season, at least as far as week 0 is concerned, on the right foot. And we see a good game between the Cornhuskers and the Wildcats. A little bit later in the afternoon, the Yukon Huskies taking on Utah State, 4 p.m. on FS1. The Huskies bringing in Jim Mora as their new head coach. Yukon, a basketball school far and away. They've lost their football program a couple different times. It has not been good for the Yukon when it comes to football. And Utah State has been a pretty good program over the last, half a decade or so. They've given our Spartans a good battle in years past and been one of the better teams in their conference for a while. Expecting Utah State to roll all over the Huskies. But if you're looking for, a game to watch at 4 p.m., Fox Sports 1, FS1.
I guess you might just
there's
better
something
off
to watch at least.
taking a nap or something. Gearing up for the night games.
Yeah, I mean, not too much to talk about this one. Expecting Utah State to roll handily. This is only the second time these two schools have met. The last time was 20 years ago, so you literally can't take anything away from that. A 27.5 point spread for Utah State. So if you're a gambling man and feel like Yukon can be inside of 4 touchdowns, there you go. Put some money on the Huskies. At 4:30, Big Ten Network, Wyoming at Illinois. And this will be the first time these schools have ever met. Last season, Illinois had a 5-7 record, and not a great season, but they pulled victories over Penn State as well as Minnesota, and only 3 of those 7 came by more than a touchdown. They got a new quarterback coming in transfer from Syracuse, Tommy DeVito, and see if he can bring Illinois a better season than last season, starting off hosting Wyoming at 4:30 of the Big Ten Network. 11-point spread. Any thoughts for you on the Fighting Illini and the Broncos?
As long as they can score points in this game, they should be all right. Wyoming doesn't have a very good offense, and they really haven't ever had a really good offense, not even when Josh Allen was there. And now you see what Josh Allen's doing in the NFL, and it's like you couldn't even score points with this guy. So I think as long as Illinois doesn't get in like a rock fight, they should be all right. They should be all right with the spread as well. I think just genuinely they're a better team than Wyoming is. And the way to avoid the upset is to score points and for them to score them early because Wyoming is not a team that's, built or designed to mount some type of comeback by just scoring in bunches.
Yeah, a low spread in this game. I think it's around 40, 45 points. So they're not expecting a barn burner when it comes to a high-scoring affair. And we'll see what this transfer from Syracuse, Tommy DeVito, can do with his new squad, the Fighting Illini. 11-point spread. I got nothing on this one. You feel like betting, good luck to you. The late game, Vanderbilt traveling to Paradise to take on the Hawaii Warriors. This will be at 10:30 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. So, if you got a house party going on or something and you want something else in the background while everyone's drinking, you can have yourself a football game to watch. I always think, whoever got to go to Hawaii to start off the year is starting off quite lucky. You get to go to one of the more beautiful places on earth, definitely one of the more beautiful places in this country. And the Rainbow Warriors, just the Warriors now, it's been that way for a while, they're ushering in a new era with a former quarterback of theirs. Timmy Chang is taking over his first season as head coach of the Warriors, and they get a nice tough test, quote-unquote tough test. They're taking on an SEC team. not a good SEC team, but it is an SEC team. So, maybe they get to see how they do against, a Power 5 conference opponent.
I expect Vanderbilt to win this game. Not that I think either team is any good, but Hawaii certainly isn't any good. And if you're a Michigan fan, you'll get to see two of these teams that we talked about up close because Michigan plays both Yukon and Hawaii. With this, I expect Vanderbilt to win, even though they're not a good SEC team, like you said. They should still have SEC type talent. Of course, all the top talent is going to LSU or Alabama, Georgia, Florida, wherever, and Vanderbilt's getting the leftovers and the scraps. But I think those scraps are still better than what Hawaii is getting because, they're probably not getting like the best players in Hawaii either with those guys going to USC, Notre Dame, wherever. So I don't know. I just feel like Vanderbilt has the players that Hawaii doesn't, although Hawaii, of course, has the home field advantage with the time difference and everything else. So that is something that could factor into this game. I wouldn't bet on the spread, but I would think that Vanderbilt would win this game.
Yeah, they definitely have an edge against Hawaii. Hawaii has a whole new head coach, whole new offensive system, a young quarterback who didn't play a ton last year. But if you're feeling froggish and feel like leaping, last year Vanderbilt started off week 0 against East Tennessee State University, and East Tennessee State University beat Vandy 23-3. So, like I said, you're feeling froggish, feel like leaping, there's a chance that you can bet on Hawaii. But Vanderbilt, they got a pretty decent 1-2 punch at running back in Ramon Davis and Rocco Griffin. And with Hawaii, literally a whole new system, new head coach, and a quarterback that hasn't played that much, expectations should be tempered a little bit for the Warriors.
Vanderbilt, very loosely in the SEC, but I guess you still don't want to test out your entire new offense and new team against a defense that should theoretically be filled with SEC players.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Rocco Griffin as a nickname?
For me, I thought it was his. It's like, what's his nickname? What's his real name?
Yeah, that's his. That's his name. But Griffin, Ryan, Rocco.
Rocco Griffin. So young man Rumble.
All I think about is literally Rocky, because that's literally what Paulie called him all the time, was Rocco. And Rocco's Modern Life. All right, so Ryan, we here, man. College football is this weekend. We in the college football season. I can't wait. Gives us something new to talk about, because obviously, there's only so much we can talk about with NFL preseason, and we still got to wait a little bit until that season kicks off. But college football is here. That also means fall is around the corner for those living in northern states, so maybe they're not looking that forward to it. Southern state people definitely looking forward to it, get out of the heat wave with fall coming around the corner. College football, literally this weekend. Cannot believe we're already here.
Excited.
Awesome. All right. Hardwood. Whole bunch of stuff going on in the offseason of the NBA. Big news earlier in the week. Kevin Durant is staying in Brooklyn, Ryan, after all of the pump faking. No shot was taken whatsoever.
Yeah,
KD staying in Brooklyn.
His bluff, and he wanted to get traded. It didn't seem like the Nets were super serious about trading him. All the reports from the stuff that they wanted back. The Wolves gave a lot up to get Rudy Gobert. And the Nets obviously wanted more for Kevin Durant than the Jazz got for Rudy Gobert. And it didn't seem like any team was really taking it seriously. Reported by Shams Charania that they had an offer on the table from the Celtics for Jaylen Brown, like a single first-round pick, and Derek White. And that was the best offer that the Nets had. And now they're keeping Kevin Durant. And it's what I thought they should have done all offseason. We talked about it on here. And I was like, why not just run it back with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and all these other players that you have? Because you look at the roster, and it seems like it's a pretty good roster on paper. So I expect the Nets to be pretty good, provided that everybody plays. But if everybody does play, this is a team that can certainly win the East.
Yeah, like you said, with Rudy Gobert and the Minnesota deal of, 4 future first-round picks, you're setting the bar so high for now what, the Nets would want to get for someone of Kevin Durant's level, and we're talking about one of the greatest basketball players to play the game of basketball. And there were teams out there, the Heat was a preferred destination, but they weren't letting go of Bam Adebayo. The Suns was a possibility, but then DeAndre Ayton returned, and they weren't giving up Devin Booker, so that wasn't happening. Boston, just like you said, they wanted Tatum in the mix. Tatum wasn't going. Boston said no. And Minnesota with Anthony Edwards, New Orleans with Brandon Ingram. They're asking a lot while obviously giving up a lot, but I think these teams felt like KD doesn't want to be there. Why are we going to give up our entire world to try and get him when he doesn't want to be there? Let's see if we can work something else out. Obviously, that did not come to fruition. Enough was done, but, it has got to be so awkward this preseason in Brooklyn for the Nets. You're talking about a head coach in Steve Nash who has been he's been talked about constantly by KD and Kyrie. We're going to coach as a committee and all this crap. He's not really the head coach. All this stuff that has been said. And then KD saying it's Nash or me. And, the Nets saying, well, it's Nash. And so guess what? You're under contract. You're literally in the first year of a 4-year, 5-year contract, whatever it is. You have 4 years remaining on this contract. How awkward is this going to be in Brooklyn with this whole situation?
The fact that they met, I don't know that it's going to be so awkward anymore, at least for now. If things start going awry in the regular season, then I can see all of this coming back up and rearing its head again. But for now, I would think everybody's just kind of cool with each other, but knowing that it could bubble up at any minute. The minute Kyrie decides not to play a game, or Kevin Durant wants them to sign somebody and they don't. I guess he wants them to still sign Carmelo Anthony, which is something the Nets obviously have not done. They could still do it because he's still a free agent, but he wanted them to sign Carmelo, and that's not something that they're doing. So if the Nets get off to a rough start, I can see a lot of finger pointing going on. You didn't build this team the right way, or Nash isn't coaching us the right way, et cetera, et cetera. And then we kind of fall into the cycle again of, are these guys going to be together at the trade deadline?
This team is like a soap opera. You want to watch because you don't want to miss what's going to happen next. We haven't seen the best of this team, obviously. Last year, Kyrie not being vaccinated, couldn't play half the season, couldn't play at home, couldn't play in Toronto. So you never really got to see that come to fruition. And then the Ben Simmons trade, he didn't play at all in Philadelphia. He didn't play at all in Brooklyn either. He obviously should be playing this upcoming season. This will be interesting to see because Ben Simmons has been on the Philadelphia team where they've not really had an outside scoring ability like this. Obviously not like this, not like a Kyrie and a Kevin Durant, where you've got two players that can get their own bucket at any time they want. And now his job, which he has always been good at as far as facilitating, is going to be a heck of a lot easier, assuming everyone's healthy and able to play and comes together. It could be a really good season for Brooklyn. They have the people, they have their big three, and then they got some pretty good people around the big three to make it a good season for Brooklyn. But God, there is so much drama between these three stars in one way or another. They're lucky that Nash is the way that Nash is. Nash has always been low-key, cool as a cucumber, all that stuff. His playing career, he was that way. He fought hard. I'm not talking about that. But just his demeanor outside, and in the locker room and all that stuff, he's always just been much more low-key and not so much in your face. Because if they had someone like a Pat Riley or a Chuck Daly or a Phil Jackson who can really get it or a Popovich, it would be a whole different ballgame than what they're dealing with Steve Nash. But they have the talent. They just got to get rid of the drama and go win a basketball game.
And, you mentioned obviously the big three, but then you still have Joe Harris. You still have Seth Curry. You still have TJ Warren coming off the bench, Patty Mills. So they have a bunch of guys. They have a bunch of guys that can shoot, and they don't really have a center. They have Nick Claxton, who I think is pretty good, but that, of course, can't be your all-time center. But it seems like Ben Simmons might play some center. I guess I wouldn't be so surprised if Kevin Durant is out there running, some center, because I think every version of the Nets is going to be essentially a small ball version. I don't know that there's going to be anybody that they sign who is like a big guy that they can get in there, like Andre Drummond or something, who can go down and, I don't know, rebound and try and be a force on defense that way. And I think they're just going to make people try and outscore them, because it still seems like, even with the addition of Ben Simmons, their defense isn't going to be very good. But you're also going to have to outscore the Nets, and that's going to be a very big problem, because it seems like everybody on their team is capable of putting the ball in the basket.
Yeah, like I said, soap opera, plenty of drama, plenty of great basketball available as well. So we will obviously be following closely with the Nets, because
their first
this should
game
be one of the teams to watch in the East.
The Pelicans.
And if they get it all together,
that'll be a track meet.
There we go. Let's see if Zion and Ben Simmons can both
CJ
return.
And Brandon Ingram against, Kyrie, Ben Simmons, and KD.
Should be a fun one. All right, Ryan. LeBron James is up to his old tricks once again. He did this years ago with Andrew Wiggins, but at least with Wiggins, he still let him play basketball. He just said, you couldn't play basketball with me in Cleveland. This time, he's taking Chet Holmgren out of the league before the kid even gets a chance to play. Just joking, obviously, but Chet Holmgren will miss the 2022-23 season because of a Liz Frank injury in his right foot. It happened while he was guarding LeBron James at the crossover Pro-Am event that was held up in Seattle, the one that got canceled by halftime because they went to a piece of crap gym with no air conditioning on a hot, humid day and thought it'd be a good idea to run a basketball game and think that there's no way any of that humidity would stick inside the court. Well, it did, and just in that one half alone, it was enough to end the season for who would have been one of the top three, betting prospects for Rookie of the Year. So Holmgren not playing at all, obviously not good news for Oklahoma City, but, if you spin it the way that other people have, like our own Paul Roshan has, as far as the kid can just go get bigger and stronger now because he can't play basketball, so you might as well lift weights and get some meat on that frame. But obviously not good news for Holmgren, not good news for Oklahoma City.
It is such a great idea for Chet to be putting on a tremendous amount of weight when he can't walk, and then he tries to walk again, and his feet and his body are like, what the hell are you doing to me? Like, what are you, like, you've never weighed this much before. It's obviously terrible news, and I do think it's concerning for the future, because with any big guys, whether they're big or skinny, because Kevin Durant had something similar early in his career with foot issues, and everyone thought, this is going to be a guy, because he's so tall, the feet are never a good thing to injure, and Kevin Durant's been fine for the most part. Obviously tore his Achilles, which is totally separate from the other thing. But, if you're just a tall dude, you don't want to be injured in your feet. And obviously Chet is very tall, and his foot is now very injured enough to keep him out of the 2022, 2023 NBA season. And it's terrible news. I do think, again, it is concerning for the future. It's not anything that, there's concerns about his body coming into the NBA, and this isn't related to that in any way, shape, or form. But I just think it's an extra concern because now you have this super tall guy who his feet are, now they don't work, or one of them doesn't work at least. And he's not, of course, going to be playing basketball for a while. And, the real spin zone is if you're Oklahoma City and you just tank and try and get the number one pick again. Or not again because you didn't get it, but you know what I mean? Try and get the number one pick so then you can take Victor Wembanyama, and then you just have Victor and Chet as the two Twin Towers, and you dare people to score on you inside.
Right. Yeah, well, Thunder's GM Sam Presti had a meeting with reporters earlier today, Thursday, during an availability session, and talked about the fact that Holmgren will have foot surgery after they consulted with 3 of the nation's top foot specialists. He confirmed that he suffered a ruptured tendon in his foot, not a fracture, and noted that the Thunder were still optimistic about his long-term recovery, but that they would be extremely conservative about it. This is not unprecedented. We have seen this before. We saw it with Ben Simmons. We saw it with Blake Griffin. We saw it with Greg Oden. We saw it with Joel Embiid. There's been big names that have been knocked out early and then came back. Obviously, Blake Griffin and Joel Embiid in that way. But then there's the Greg Odens who got knocked out early and never really came back. Obviously, we are hoping that doesn't happen to Chet. He has been enjoyable to watch his 1 year at Gonzaga, and it would be nice to see him eventually, next season, obviously, at this point. So hopefully he comes back healthy and is able to resume his NBA career.
Yeah, we hope so. Obviously, you don't want to see him go through like what Greg Oden went through, or even Joel Embiid, who missed his first 2 seasons completely, and didn't play basketball until his 3rd year, where he only played 31 games that year. So you hope it's nothing too serious like that. Obviously Embiid's been able to bounce back from it, but as good as he is now, imagine if he had like 2 extra seasons of all NBA type numbers, because my guess is he would have been pretty good from the jump. And it just seems like that's what Chet is missing, and then he's going to have to wait a whole year to get into NBA action, whether it's a summer league next year or a preseason or the regular season or whatever it is. It's just slowing your development a year. And not that is, of course, the worst thing in the world, because we've seen guys come back from it. But it's certainly something you don't want to happen. And we've seen it derail guys, and we've seen it, I guess, not really affect guys, to your point.
Yeah. All right, last bit of NBA Roundup news coming out of the city that is known for producing drama. Usually it's on your television screens and on purpose. The Los Angeles Lakers have traded Taylor Horton-Tucker and Stanley Johnson to Utah for Pat Beverly. Ryan, there's no way they're going to allow this to happen. There's no way they are going to actually have Pat Beverly and Russell Westbrook on the same team.
I think probably not.
There's no way.
But you could, because you still have to find some way to take Westbrook's contract. And I know the rumor going around is Westbrook and then the 2 first to Indiana for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. But, I mean, they're not like they have a choice whether or not they want to play together, right? And the Lakers needed, a backup guard and a starting guard. So make of that what you will. Which one of them's going to do? Which one of them's going to do what? But I would like to be, fly on the wall in those practices if those two end up, starting the season together, because that would be fun. And there are a lot of guys who don't like each other on the basketball court, but respect each other, outside of it, and can kind of keep their rivalry just within the confines of the game. That does not seem like it's the case with Russell Westbrook and Patrick Beverly. I know Patrick Beverly is kind of famously the guy that got Russell Westbrook hurt in the playoffs when there was a timeout. Westbrook went to go call the timeout, and Beverly kind of slid in to try and get the ball, and that's when Russ tore his ACL or his Achilles, whatever he did. And Russ has always held a grudge since then, I'm sure rightfully so in Russell Westbrook's mind. So I think these guys really don't like each other at all. So you wouldn't think they'd be on the same team, but it's certainly possible, and I hope that is what happens.
Yeah, what you're talking about happened way back in 2013. That is what kind of kicked this off. That's not what everyone remembers. Obviously, everyone remembers later on in 2019 when Westbrook's with the Rockets and they defeated Beverly, who was with the Clippers, and James Harden dropped 47 points, and Westbrook coming out saying, talking about Pat Beverly's defense. Really this is one of the great all-time ones, even if it wasn't true. But Pat Bev tricking y'all, man. He playing defense, he don't guard nobody, he just running around doing nothing. Now, it is a fantastic quote that has been remembered and will probably be remembered for a very long time. But if you actually went and looking into it, at the time that Patrick Beverly guarded James Harden went 0 for 6 with 4 turnovers in those times that he was being guarded by Beverly. But no one cares. No one wants to get in the way of a good story. It's way more fun to just think about what Westbrook said and how him and Pat Bev have gone back and forth ever since. But taking it bigger, how does this help the Lakers? The Lakers were a very bad defensive team last year, and Patrick Beverly has been one of the better defenders over the last 5, 6, 7 years. They call him a 3-and-D. He's a 34% three-point shooter. Not great, not terrible. Average around 9-10 points a game. He's not the outside shooters that the Lakers really need, but he can do a little bit for you, and his defense is helpful, so maybe it'll help a little bit. But this ain't the move that gets the Lakers over the top, in my opinion. Over the
top, but I think they get a guy who is a decent defender. I don't think he's great, like maybe his reputation is, but he's also somebody who's just an irritant who can come in and get in those scraps that LeBron or Anthony Davis don't want to get in. And I know last year Patrick Beverly wasn't a real good 3-point shooter, 34% last year, but he's been a pretty good 3-point shooter throughout his entire career. From 2016 to 2021, he shot at least 38% every year in that time frame, and with twice going, kind of just at 40%. So I think last year is more of an anomaly, and to me, he's still a guy that can shoot. It sounds like you have a little bit less faith that his shot will come back, but to me, it's a guy who can help the Lakers, and he'll probably get more open shots with the creation that LeBron James can kind of generate, and Russell Westbrook too. If he ends up being on the team. That's how I think it helps the Lakers. They get somebody who can defend, and they get somebody who can theoretically shoot 3-pointers, although he couldn't last year. Throughout his career, he's been a pretty reliable 3-point shooter.
Well, we will see. More drama, NBA offseason, man, nothing like it. It's so entertaining every time. All right, we got to get out of here. Before we do, I want to give a shout out to my man who would have been 44 this past Tuesday, August 23rd, the late, great Kobe Bryant. Yesterday was August 24th, obviously known as Kobe Bryant Day, because it's 8/24, obviously. We miss you. Wish you were still around, because life's just not fair sometimes. Anyway, we got to get up out of here. Thank you for kicking it with Griffin and Bass. For Ryan Griffin, I'm Matt Bassin. As always, Wu-Tang. It's for the children.
Peace.
We'll see y'all after the weekend. Peace.